the Fan3Cast, dishing out the hottest NASCAR news and views while celebrating the three's historic comeback. Here are your hosts, Michael Metzger and Jason Schultz.
We have our broom with us because that is the story of the weekend after Brad Keselowski sweeps the Nationwide and the Sprint Cup Series races at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, winning both Saturday and Sunday, Sunday being the Camping World RV Sales 301, which, by the way, that extra mile, I know Camping World, you want to go the extra mile with that. It's kind of annoying when races do that kind of promotion. Personally, that's my opinion.
Actually, the 301, I think, came out when Lennox was sponsoring that race, because that, I think, the first race I ever went to at New Hampshire was the Lennox race, and it was 301 they started that year. So that's interesting, and the extra mile actually did make a difference on Sunday with the late green-white checkers that really shook things up for a few drivers.
Yes, and kind of on that theme real quick, I noticed today that the Bristol Nationwide Series race goes 50 extra laps in August. I can't believe I didn't hear about this until today.
Yeah, I think they announced it pretty far back, and that Bristol race always does seem really short, and you never really figure NASCAR would add laps to a race, and especially in the Nationwide race, so it definitely shows you how they think 50 more laps is going to really help that race out, and maybe add some excitement that Bristol always carries, no matter what.
Let's focus in on New Hampshire. Start of the race, it was pretty evident that Keselowski was the class of the field, and each time he got marred back in traffic, he was able to work his way back up like it was absolutely nothing to him. Yeah,
definitely. And we saw that it was just he had the best car each and every restart, despite where he started maybe 10th, and he had to work through the field, like you said. He had the best car. He had the most dominant car, and there was really no stopping him, no matter what any other drivers tried. But his teammate may have been stopped a little on track in his pursuit of a top 5 finish.
Yes, and a good thing for Keselowski is they had a couple extra rubber bands on the Lobster that they give the winner to hold on to, because we know how well he does in celebrations.
Yeah, that was probably a good move by whoever brought the Lobster to the track.
Now, as you kind of alluded to, Joey Logano was looking like it could have been a Team Penske 1-2 sweep. That was not to be after a run-in with Morgan Shepherd, who was the butt of a few jokes last week, but unfortunately this week has been the talk of the town. So Jason, I'll chime in after you, but was this a case of a 72-year-old driver who shouldn't be out there, or was it just a racing deal?
I'm leaning towards the side of it being a racing deal. I don't think that age has anything to do with it. You have 18-year-olds on track, and if you thought about it, would the less experienced drivers maybe mess up more than the 72-year-old who's had a ton of experience? So it was definitely a racing deal, in my opinion. And Shepherd didn't have that great of a car, so it's probably a combination of the car being slow and not having the best equipment, which probably led to him just struggling throughout the race, and then he happens to go into turn 3 and get a little loose, get into Logano, and make, you could say, take him out, but it was just Logano. They ended with that, and I don't think Shepherd's age had anything to do with it. Logano, they were just racing, and maybe he should have gave on the 22 car a little more room, but, you can't. It's probably hard to judge those things sometimes, so complete racing deal, in my opinion.
If the roles were reversed and it was, say, Cole Witt or Landon Castle in that position, probably wouldn't be as much scrutiny as it would be for Shepherd. And I agree with you. It was a racing deal, but there's a bigger issue here than a 72-year-old driver. It's cars that obviously have no business being on the track. I know NASCAR has a minimum speed, but I believe it was Jeff Gordon was alluding to it, was basically saying that tracks like New Hampshire and Bristol, where in clean air you can achieve a certain amount of speed, but you're going to be in traffic and it's going to be a lot slower, that NASCAR really has to do something to either rein in those speeds or just identify drivers as basically moving chicanes out there that need to be stopped, basically.
And the only thing I could really think of to maybe correct that problem in the future is with the whole race team alliance thing. If they're able to help smaller teams out and maybe reduce costs across the board for all the teams, but that would help the smaller teams maybe be able to put some more money towards the equipment if they're saving money in another way. So I definitely think that this problem could be corrected if this race team alliance thing turns out to become anything interesting and really make a difference.
See, I'm always, I don't fully understand what this alliance is for, and I would like to think that they would be for the betterment of the sport when it comes to things like money, but all I got to do is look at other professional sports like the NFL, or hockey's a good one. They put a salary cap in place, but these owners still go out and make ridiculous contracts that they end up paying for years and years and years. So equating that to this racing deal, sure, they can put caps on how much maybe you spend in a weekend or you spend on this or that, but then they're going to turn around and take the money that they're saving, and the top teams are going to funnel it into something else. So I don't know if the owners can save themselves from themselves with any sort of agreement or anything like that.
It'll definitely be something we'll have to watch over the next few months, probably, and maybe years, to see if it develops into anything. But I think all the details are still really being figured out by the whole alliance, and we'll probably hear more about it when it starts making some sort of a difference.
Yeah, it was interesting. What I've been doing the last couple of weeks is watching old races, and this is going to come up a little later on in the show, but I just finished watching the 1998 Daytona 500, and I got to say, side note to the point I'm going to make on this is I still get goosebumps watching Dale Earnhardt win that race, and it just was amazing watching that and getting all the emotions stirring back in me. But circling back to the point I want to make, they had 56 cars show up for the Daytona 500 that year. 56. Obviously, only 43 made it into the field, so 13 drivers went home, and it was a pretty good roster of drivers. It wasn't just nobodies out there, and what was especially neat about it is some nobodies made the field, like Andy Hillenberg. There has to be something done to even the playing field enough that random teams could just show up and try to compete at different races so you can get your car count up. The only reason we had 43 cars this past weekend is because BK Racing entered a fourth car just to have it park after about 20 laps.
A few side notes off of what you just said. First, if you said 56 cars for that Daytona 500, the truck count for Eldora next weekend is 33 trucks, which is just a shock because last year there was at least, I think, about 40 trucks going, and now they have 33, which isn't even a full field for a regular truck race, but this race will only have 30, so 3 guys will go home. But that car on truck count is just really surprising, and you said the 1998 500, Dale Earnhardt won that. That was the day before I was born, and that's always cool. I think of that because the day before, the day Dale won, and it's just all around the same time, which I think was pretty neat.
Wow, I just feel incredibly old after that statement. Thank you for that, Jason. But to my credit, I wasn't that old at the time. Well, whatever. But going back to Eldora, yeah, I was looking at that, and I was kind of shaking my head in disbelief because I could have sworn we would see, like, drivers that showed interest last year racing it. How is Tony Stewart not racing it? I understand maybe concerns over his leg, but my gosh, you're a partial owner in that track. Wouldn't you want to get out there and either drum up more business or, come on, you want to win another race on dirt? How many opportunities do you get to do that in a truck?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, something he'll probably consider. Maybe he'll do it in the next few years, but there's also guys like Ryan Newman, or Kenny Wallace, they both raced last year. I think Newman finished second, so it's surprising to see some of those guys not on the race, and we've really jumped off New Hampshire here, but we're going to jump back to the race, and we have a few fan questions. And first we have at NAS_TSCRN asked if we agreed with Steve Lepart's strategy on fuel, which was basically he pushed Dale to the limit. He didn't bring him in pit road for the last 50 or so laps, I think. So it was really a big stretch on fuel, and it didn't really affect him at all. And I agreed with it because they had nothing to lose. They're already in the chase, and they would just have been disappointed if they were finished 15th, so why not go with the field gamble and just see what you can do, even if it's a big risk you're taking, but it didn't really matter for them, considering they've got 2 wins already.
Thank you, Jason, for pulling us back into what we originally were talking about, and I totally agree with you, so that's kind of a boring response to that, but they have nothing to lose. I believe they didn't clinch until after the race, but they're clinched into the chase now. You got to make those kind of calls and just kind of go for it at this point if you feel that you have enough of a cushion that you don't have to worry about placing as high as you need to place. Look at Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick. Those were 2 drivers who have wins under their belt, pretty much in great position to get into the chase. Both of them also rolled the dice on fuel. Both of them were bit. But with having that in the bank, so to speak, to making the chase, you got to go for it. Get more wins, keep other people from getting into the chase, add bonus points. Why not? And especially for Earnhardt, man, that was a hard-fought 10th place finish. And that interview after the race with him, you would have thought that someone took his puppy and shot it right in front of him. He looked miserable and sad and depressed, and he finished 10th.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think they just had a rough weekend altogether. Maybe Dale had a few. He thought maybe they fixed the issue on Saturday in practice or something. So he probably had the mindset of, I think I'm going to actually have a chance on Sunday. So 10th may have not been his best, the best finish he thinks he could have got, but I think after the weekend he had, it was good enough.
And like I might have said last week, or I believe I said last week, you got to use this kind of as a test session because New Hampshire is your second race into the chase, and then after that it's the first elimination race. So if you're going to try to roll the dice on fuel, maybe you get a better understanding of how far you can go on fuel. Maybe that works to your benefit in the fall.
And that's one thing I think Jimmy Johnson was trying to do until he wrecked come out 14. That was definitely his goal of let's test a few things out. New Hampshire's not typically his best track, so when he comes back for the second race of the chase in the fall, you're going to want to have something because he knows if you need the win to be able to move on in the chase and be able to clinch a spot. And now we have another fan question. This is from @gman1439, and he asked what we thought of Brad Keselowski's Reds Apple Ale paint scheme, which is different than the blue and white, Miller Lite one he typically runs. And the red paint scheme for the Blue Deuce, it's not my favorite. I'm not a big fan of it. I think that in the number 2 car and the colors blue and white, I think I like those the best because it really looks good. Maybe if he added like white or something to this Reds Apple Ale scheme, I think it'd be a little better, but it's probably not Team Penske's best paint scheme they've put out on the track in a while.
Unfortunately, with a sponsor called Reds, you're probably 100% guaranteed a red car. I see what you're saying because actually, while you were talking about that, I was taking a look at, I have a die-cast Ryan Newman car, Quicken Loans, and that's got a good mix of white, red, and black to it. Kind of breaks it up instead of just being one solid color. So I didn't horribly mind the paint scheme. Like you said, it's not the best I've ever seen, but I don't think it's the worst I've ever seen. And then a quick side note on Keselowski, especially Reds is a bad example because of that being another alcohol sponsorship, but a lot of people were surprised this past offseason when Team Penske, I should say, basically told Miller Lite, we don't want you to sponsor the entire season, we want you to only sponsor half or more than half. And probably a lot of people were like, well, what are they doing other than taking Sam Hornish Jr.'s sponsorship? But think of it this way. I've seen a few things where Kevin Harvick was featured. Kevin Harvick sponsored by Budweiser, but he had Jimmy John's on the car or the display or whatever was up because it's a family-oriented sponsor as opposed to the beer sponsor in Budweiser. And with Keselowski being 100% sponsored by Miller Lite, never had that opportunity. So that's good marketing on their part. You know, now they can be a part of video games or have a 1/64 scale car that actually says a sponsor on it as opposed to the Blue Deuce or whatever they put on there nowadays.
And I think we should dedicate this show to Brad Keselowski because we're moving to our power rankings, and Mr. Keselowski happens to top both of our charts, and I have him up top because he's been dominant, he's been great, he's turning into the champion form that we've seen in 2012 when he took the title. And I put Dale Earnhardt Jr. in second. He's just been consistent, knocking off these great finishes. He survived the Daytona race, and he was around when they called it for rain. So he's definitely on a consistent roll, and he's doing pretty well. And third, I added Joey Logano, despite him wrecking at New Hampshire. I just put him up there because he's been pretty consistent. He's got 2 wins, and he's just rolling right now and just waiting for the chase to come. So he's one I've had an eye on, and he's doing pretty well. So I had to include him in my power rankings this week.
Keselowski, far and away the best driver this past weekend, as everyone saw on track. And Jason, I think I forgot to mention that we're sponsored by Miller Lite now for this rest of this episode, because we've been plugging them so much. I had Jimmy Johnson up there ranking second despite the terrible finish, 42nd at New Hampshire. Statistically speaking, mine are based off of those fun statistics. He, even with that kind of handicap the last 2 weeks, he still has the numbers to be right up there. And Kevin Harvick I had up there, if he has the fuel, if he pits with Denny Hamlin before the green-white checkered goes, he could have had a solid finish, rolled the dice, got bit by it, but I see him recovering real quick. Now, Jason, I don't know if you're aware of this or not. You probably were because you pay attention to Twitter and stuff like that more than I, but Brad Keselowski was on TV the other night.
Yeah, I saw something about that. I'm not a huge TV show fan, so I wasn't really sure what he was doing or what he was doing it for, but I definitely noticed that.
I noticed that it was a bunch of NASCAR-related puns, which hopefully he wasn't on there too long because you can only take too many of them. But speaking of television, we have the TV broadcast to talk about. And after 32 years of covering NASCAR, we say goodbye to Turner Broadcasting and no more TNT coverage of NASCAR events for at least the next 10 years. Normally, I'd be sympathetic to the historical aspect of Turner being there since the early 80s, but my gosh, I cannot be more ecstatic for them to just go away. And New Hampshire was another good example of it. Full disclosure, didn't watch the race live, watched it on DVR, and I was just flipping through. I'd watch portions of the race. Brad Keselowski would start dominating. I'd start fast-forwarding. But lo and behold, every time I'd actually watch the race, I just still drives me insane how Wally Dallenbach and Kyle Petty talk out there. I understand you can't have a scripted call of a race, but my gosh, they were struggling to come up with things to talk about. They were struggling with, when they did have thoughts, conveying those thoughts. And it's like, you guys have been doing this, Wally, 10 years now. Kyle, the last 3, 4. It's like, how have you not gotten your stuff together?
And I'll quickly add from what you said about Turner, and it was definitely just sad to see that long of a broadcast partner really leave, but what TNT has been showing on television with their summer 6 races, and it's just become just ridiculous because it's the commercials, and there's always something that just bothers fans, and you definitely see that through social media. They just don't like TNT, so sad to see Turner leave, but TNT, I'm not going to really miss them. And I've always said these things about the announcers all season long, and I did sort of tune out of the race when it was about halfway and Keselowski was dominating, so I didn't really pay attention too closely. But I think I'll have to rewatch 40 laps to see what you're saying about these announcers, because I never really picked up on it, but I probably wasn't really listening for it either.
Yeah, it's just interesting, especially Dallenbach. He seems to get tripped up on his own thoughts trying to talk, and my biggest thing, especially editing this podcast, is I have a bad habit of saying, and now I've become very cognizant of when other people say it, so I kept hearing it left and right that I was going a little insane watching it, because I'm like, edit it out! But they can't. It's a live broadcast.
Since there is no Sprint Cup Series race this weekend, it's an off week. The Nationwide Series is at Chicago, and we'll check that out. We've decided to end the show today with we're going to give our dream team of announcers. And since NBC's coming in next year, there's a whole bunch of TV-related stuff going on within the sport right now. So if we had to put together a broadcast team right now, these are the people we put in booth and on pit road. My booth is, I have Mike Joy, Larry Mack, and Dale Jarrett, and that's basically the announcer, the crew chief, and the driver. I just like Joy. He just has a great way of telling knows how when those races end. I always enjoy hearing what you have to say, like so and so won the 500. They will add something really neat. I like that part out of his broadcasting. I like Larry Mack. He adds some information that I probably never would have realized if it wasn't for him. And Dale Jarrett, I like just how he can relate to what the drivers are saying and doing, and I just like how he operates himself in the booth.
I would have to go for my dream team booth. Alan Bestwick doing the play-by-play with, I gotta agree with you, Larry Mack and Dale Jarrett rounding out the rest of the booth. I have Jeff Burton penciled in here, but I think we have to actually see him in action. He has the tools, and it seems like the abilities to be a great announcer, but without really seeing him in action, we don't know what we have. But I like Mike Joy for the historical nuggets that he brings into it, but I've always enjoyed how Bestwick calls a race. He really seems on top of it, keeps everything on point. Like you said about Larry Mack, he has a lot that he contributes to the broadcast that you just wouldn't think of. I'm a little torn with him because I feel like when on TNT, when they actually had him in like the crew chief consultant role during the races, I thought he was really good at explaining what was going on with the cars, getting kind of more technical than he can in the booth. And Jarrett, I've been pleasantly surprised. I've been paying attention more to him this year than I have in previous years, and he's actually a lot better than I thought he was going to be.
And you mentioned Alan Bestwick being your guy in the booth. Well, he's from ESPN, and my pit road combined pretty much most of ESPN's pit road reporters. I have Jamie Little, Chris Devoda, Mike Massaro, and Shannon Big. I like Jamie Little. I just like when she. I'm sorry, that went over. I enjoy hearing Jamie Little call the pit road action because she's really bold in what she says, just like going for Brad Keselowski taking 4 tires, and it's really assertive, and I like that. And Chris Devoda, she's just always gets all the information you need, and maybe it adds a few other things that are interesting. Mike Machado, he's really good on pit road. I like his voice, hearing his voice, and it's a really good racing voice. And Shannon Spig is typically a basketball, other sports reporter for ESPN now, but she started in NASCAR and she's been doing really well. She's done a few races this season, but she's always a great addition for ESPN on pit road.
For my pit road reporters, I get a little nostalgia. I can't go wrong with Dick Berggren, listening to him, especially in the old-time races. It's a familiar voice. He knows a lot about the ins and outs of NASCAR that just adds more than just people just reporting on who's pitting and doing what. And then I have Dr. Jerry Punch is my other one. Another one, he's been there for 20, 30-odd years. I can't even remember, but he's just, I don't know, when I think of pit reporters, I think of Jerry Punch. Marty Snyder, he was covering for TNT. He's been doing different things with TNT, but he's another one that throughout the last 10 years I've associated with pit road and doing a great job. And then I have Ralph Shaheen bringing it full circle if you have 4 of them down there. Just another guy who's been in the industry for a while, knows his stuff, familiar voice that you've heard him every week.
And to round out our dream teams, we go to the pre-race show, and ESPN's Nicole Briscoe, she's going to be the host of my pre-race show. I think she's hilarious. She does a great job with, previewing everything to come in the race, talking about stuff. She can be serious, she can be funny, and she likes to joke around and make it interesting to watch that show. It's not like boring pre-race, so when ESPN takes over at Indy, I'm going to enjoy watching pre-race because she's in the booth and she always makes it enjoyable to watch. And Michael Waltrip and Brad Doherty joining her. Brad, I've really enjoyed his take because he's a team owner. He's sort of new to the sport. He hasn't been in there for as long as some of the other racers who've transitioned to the booth, but he's interesting to listen to. And Michael Waltrip, he adds the little funny aspect too, like Nicole Briscoe does. And those 3, I would enjoy watching a pre-race with them because it would definitely be pretty funny, which I like in pre-race, and definitely very interesting.
For my pre-race, I would have no one. That pause was on purpose. I barely ever watch the pre-races. I really honestly feel like it's a half an hour or whatever, an hour that could be better used for some other purpose than to preview the race, because I feel like, especially in this day and age, the 24/7, you got 2 shows running all week, Race Hub and NASCAR America, that's going to give you the information of the week, and then you come to the races and it's just all the recycled stuff. Again, I'm going to point to the 1998 Daytona 500 500 watching that. Here's what they did. It was a 10-minute pre-race show. They interviewed the pole sitter, second place. Ned Jarrett took you around the track, showed you how to drive around it. They asked the opinions of Jarrett, and Buddy Baker was on the call that day, who they thought, what the top stories were, and then bam, they jumped right into the race. They did the starting lineup, and it was good to go. And I feel like that's just less is more. And I think it gets a little ridiculous thinking back to especially like Fox, where you have Michael Waltrip running up and down the grid, and it makes for kind of funny TV, but at the same time, it's like, really, this is what you're doing right now?
Despite it being an off week, we had a ton to talk about today's episode, and I think those Dream Team broadcasts, if I ever saw mine together and dealt with the new TV contract, maybe they bring in some people from the other station, but that would be just fun and interesting to watch, and that's one of the things I made sure to put in my team. It's just some people who are funny and interesting, because that makes the broadcast much more worth watching.
Very agreeable, and yeah, you're right. This is probably one of the longest podcasts we've had all year long, so hopefully I can trim it up a little bit in editing. But I think the biggest tragedy or travesty or whatever you want to call it from this new TV deal is something as simple as what happens to the 406 next year. Marty and McGee, are they going to come back? Both of them, I believe, are still going to be under contract with ESPN, but probably doing a lot of different stuff. So I think that's going to be the worst part of this transition next year.
Yeah, I hope they're back. I would assume they would find a way to be back, so it'll be interesting, and I know that there will be a lot of TV talk over the next 6 months, and by the time we have another off week in a bunch of years, and by the next time we have an off week in a bunch of months after the season's over, the TV talk's probably just going to escalate, and that'll be interesting to see, because when NBC comes in July or late June, it's going to just be a completely different whole scenario for race fans to watch.
It is definitely an exciting time of change. This weekend, Nationwide Series at the Chicagoland Speedway. Don't forget about that race. A lot of people are already just thinking that it's a complete off weekend, but it's not. And then next week, Jason, they are going dirt tracking with the Truck Series, and then off to the pinnacle of motorsports, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Thanks for listening to the Fan3Cast. For more NASCAR coverage, check out StartandParkBlog.com and Turn4RacingNews.com. Follow along on Twitter at Fan3Cast, at StartandParkBlog, and at NASCARJason.